Welcome to Convocation. Today's presentation, I titled something a little bit differently than this because I was trying to be funny. Artificial Intelligence, Doomsday or Salvation, Perspectives from the Sciences and Humanities. So we have three presenters today. All of them are Snow College faculty. And the way that things kind of got ordered as far as the order that they will take, it kind of turned into a humanities sandwich because we have the humanities sandwich in between two scientists, but I think it will all make sense. But let me tell you a little bit about our presenters. Our first presenter will be Dr. Adam Teichert, who grew up in a small town in Wyoming, and being in that rural setting, he was encouraged to work hard and be involved. In college, he wondered how he was going to turn his interests in music, language, teaching, math, and computing into a viable career. Eventually, he found that computer science was kind of the central linchpin to everything, and the way that he could tie all of these different interests together. At the University of Utah, where he completed one of his master's degrees, he worked on natural language processing, a branch of artificial intelligence that focuses on helping computers to understand the ways that humans write and speak. In his bio online at Snow College, he says, "My algorithms class and the Friends of Algorithms lunch bunch that was organized by his professor, as well as a small semantics group led by Matt Might and the colloquial talks in the computer science department. They all left a big impact on me and opened my eyes to the wide array of interesting approaches and applications in computers, science, and the connections to other fields." All right. Our second presenter will be Dr. Jacob Thomas. Professor Thomas, or perhaps some of you know him as Mr. T, attended Snow College as a student. Then he went on to earn degrees at other schools that weren't as awesome. Okay. He teaches English writing classes, British and world literature, and world religion. He is married to Melissa, my friend, and they have a daughter, also my friend, in middle school. Our final presenter today will be Dr. Sannali Dittli, who teaches chemistry. As a girl, I found this really interesting. She said that she loved James Herriot novels, and so she wanted to be a veterinarian. So she decided to go to school. When she started college, she thought she would be a biochemistry major, but then she found that she actually really, really loved her chemistry classes, and so she ended up doing that. One of her degrees, I think your terminal degree, was that it? Was at Wisconsin? Wisconsin, whose mascot is also a badger. And so she's actually 2 times a badger, which is really cool for us. So anyway, with that, we will go ahead and invite Dr. Teichert to the stage, and we'll proceed to that point. Please welcome them to the stage, by the way. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess this is on. So I'm Adam, and thanks for that introduction, Cheryl. We were asked to talk about and think about how AI, artificial intelligence, would impact our fields, and that required me to have to think about, well, what is my field? Am I a computer scientist? Am I a natural language processing AI person? Am I an educator, or am I a software engineering person? I teach computer science and software engineering here at Snow, and so it's kind of a mix of those things, but I thought I'd just focus on a couple of things in particular. So when Cheryl talked about me growing up in Wyoming, and one of the things that I wanted to be when I grew up was an inventor. And when I discovered computer science and the ability to create things without having to buy wood and concrete and metal and nails, I thought, this is awesome. I can invent things with just a text editor. And so one of the things I'm going to just hit on is how I think AI might impact who actually gets involved in programming, and maybe also what those programs look like, the prerequisites for writing code and also for running that code. So one of the text editors that I used for years was something called Emacs. And in Emacs, there was a built-in AI psychiatrist in this text editor. Sounds very weird, but it was a program that was written basically in 1965, so I'll call this like the grandmother of ChatGPT. And the thing that connects this to me is that this is the whole program. You see all of the source code for this program. There's no other numbers or models, no other libraries that it has to call out to. This is the whole thing. And that's one of the things that I loved about programming, is I could think and create and understand the whole thing and write it down. And in some ways, times are changing. But this particular program, just maybe an interesting anecdote. So Guvin Guzalder and Stefano Franchi share a story that Daniel Bobrow shares with them about this program. So he says, one Saturday morning about 9 a.m., a vice president of Bolt, Beranek, and Newman, BBN, in charge of selling our telecom commercial service, arrived at our computer room, hoping to be able to use the computer for a demonstration. So he found this note on the teletype, and it said, type all messages into this teletype and end them with a period. So this note was left there by one of the programming bums that had just finished succeeded in making run a Lisp version of this program. So they had got this program running on the computer, and now here's this vice president arriving and seeing that he's supposed to type in commands into this program. He thought that it was this other guy who had connected the computer to his home computer and that he could ask him questions. So he started typing, he thought, to this worker, but instead he was interacting with this AI. So here's how the conversation went. So the vice president says, do you think I can use this computer in the morning? Eliza, which is the name of this 1965 AI program, why do you ask? I might be able to make some additional telecom sales. Why aren't you so sure? So remember, it's doing these things based on those rules that were captured in those 2 pages of code. My prospective customers have never seen a demonstration of the system. Does this mean very much to you? Of course it does. You seem very positive about that. This is ridiculous. What do you mean this is ridiculous? Is there any reason why I can't use the computer now? Tell me more about your prospective customers. Okay, please dial me up on 491-1850. So at this point, he forgot to put the period, and so the program stopped responding to him. And he says he called up this worker, woke him from a deep sleep, and said, why are you being so snotty to me? And Bobrow, who's the guy telling the story, responds in a way that Eliza might have responded, what do you mean I am being snotty to you? And he angrily shares this thing. So I bring this up because this was a program that was kind of like, it was used for research in cognitive science, and it was actually doing something kind of useful, and it was fooling this vice president. It took him a while to convince him this was a computer. But the AI of today is not like that, right? It doesn't fit on a napkin or on 2 pieces of paper. It doesn't fit in a single mind anymore. The model itself is just really huge. And on the other hand, it allows people that maybe don't have the skills that I worked really hard to get, it allows them to start writing programs that can do really cool things. So, for example, here's a program that I was looking at this past week, playing with a little bit. You will describe the code you want to build, and based on the other code that has already been written in that project, it will generate new code. You can ask questions about the code. So maybe you don't know this language really well. You just have some really creative ideas about what you want it to do. And you can ask the computer questions about it. You can ask for suggestions. And this AI is able to respond in a way much more practically useful than before. So in some ways, maybe this is for some of you that have those really creative ideas and you want to build something for reals. And you don't want to have to learn all of the technical details. Maybe AI will get you involved in programming when you wouldn't have done that before without it. However, I think there are some increased barriers to entry as well. So on the flip side, these big models mean me in my little Wyoming town, I probably wouldn't have seen the opportunity to just build without having to pay for equipment anymore. These models cost lots of time, lots of money to prepare and to use, and so in some ways it might have pushed me away from the field. Okay, so I just want to give a couple minutes kind of overview of specifically the ChatGPT style of AI in my last slide or two. So really this model, all that's the code that I was showing those screenshots from, mostly what it's doing is, given a context, predict what the next word is. So what that model is, what the computer has remembered, is just a dictionary of words, and for each word, a representation of that word. You can think of it as like a really fine-grained poster that kind of shows all the details, all the different aspects of what that word might mean, how to understand it. On top of that, the model includes instructions for how to transform that representation. The T in GPT stands for transformer, which is this process of looking at the representations of other words in the context and coming up with a new representation for this word that incorporates that meaning. So think about pictures for each of the words individually. Now I'm going to slurp those up and transform the picture of this word to incorporate the pictures of those words that came before. And I'm going to do that many, many times. All of these transformations, these dictionary definitions, are really just long lists of numbers that are automatically tweaked by a computer in order to make it really good at predicting the next word given the previous words in like trillions of words of text that it's collected. And then finally, once I have a representation of this word in context, I have another list of numbers that lets me score that word and say how likely I think it is. So when I want to generate a word, I just look at all the words I could generate, score all of them by transforming them, and then applying the score. And then that gives me a probability distribution over words. I roll a dice, and then I generate the next word. And if I can generate one word in context, I can generate the next word, and I can create whatever language I want to create. And if I can represent pictures and other things in language, then I can generate whatever. So that's how ChatGPT works, for example. And that's where all that model comes from. So in summary, maybe this AI is going to encourage some of you that maybe would never have thought, oh, I'm going to learn a programming language, to say, hey, if ChatGPT can do the programming, I can have the big creative ideas and write some code. Maybe you'll get interested in it. And on the flip side, those programs you write might rely on AI to do their stuff at runtime, and also rely on AI while you're making them. So that could create some other barriers to entry for other people. And I really don't know. AI is my area of expertise in my training and my research, but impact on the future, telling the future, that's not actually what I was trained to do. So, thank you.
Any of my students here? Hey, there's Josh. Okay, we got one. I told them they could watch the recording later too. So, hello, students of the future. Hopefully the future is better than it is today. But we can't predict the future, right? So my name is Mr. T, and I'm going to talk to you particularly about writing, AI and writing, and how it's going to affect writing. There's this part in Shakespeare's play, Julius Caesar, where all the senators have killed Caesar, and then Mark Antony, one of the characters, comes out. He's a historical figure too, but he comes out and he gives this famous speech, right? He says, "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come not to praise Caesar, but to bury him." So I kind of feel a little bit similar like that. Of course, we haven't killed a Caesar or anything. But friends, students, badgers, I come not to praise AI, nor to bury it, but to count well the cost. Professor Teichert hath said that AI is useful, and he is an honorable man, and I agree with him. But I want to draw your attention particularly to the costs, while we also talk about some of the benefits, at least as it pertains to writing. Like was said, I started here at Snow College. I took Convocations too. I loved everything I learned from Convocations. After this, I went to Utah State, had a great experience there too, not as great as it was here. But I had a professor there in a poetry class. He said there are essentially only 4 kinds of poems. He said the first kind is, we're not getting any younger. That's what the poem says. The second is, it's lonely here without you. The third is, it's lonely here with you. And the fourth is the one I want to use as my metaphor today, but everything is a two-sided coin. Every strength is a weakness. Every move forward is also a step back, and every technological advancement comes with benefits and costs. It's important to keep that in mind. Socrates, you know Socrates, way back when, he hated writing. That was a technological advancement that was coming of age in his time, and he hated it. Why? Because he knew that people's memories wouldn't be as good. They wouldn't be as practiced if people always had to write stuff down. And so now, again, we're all so used to writing, we might not understand something like that. But just think of it. At least for me, I have a hard time remembering anything. That's why I got my notes here on my phone, right? I wrote it down so that I could remember. Maybe today our memories are not as good as they were in ancient Greece because we rely on text. That's just one example of a technological advancement that was also a step back. In the 90s, I watched a Star Trek movie called Star Trek Insurrection. You could probably still find it online somewhere. But the Star Trek crew, the Enterprise crew, they go to this planet where there's this group of people called the Baku, and they're sort of based on the Amish. And there's one line, again, I'm a kid watching this, but this line has always stuck with me. And one of the leaders of the Baku is saying, when you make a machine that can do something for a man, you take something away from that man. So again, in this society, they sort of reject a lot of technology with the recognition that any technology gives you things, but it also takes some things away. So it is, right, with AI. So let's talk about AI in writing, which is what most teachers are concerned about. So let me take you back to Christmas 2022, so not quite a year ago, when ChatGPT, the program that was talked about, came out, at least was released to the general public. And teachers panicked. At least in the Humanities division, in the English department, we started panicking. Because, well, there were a couple articles. The first article that came out that scared everybody was from The Atlantic, and it's called "The College Essay is Dead." Because ChatGPT will write an essay for you, right, if you put in the right prompts. And then later, a couple months later, The New Yorker published "The End of the English Major." And those two things, like every English professor everywhere when they read it, of course, panicked. And there are lots of responses you could read online and so forth. But again, this scared us. New technology is scary. And especially in this, what's going to happen with our field, with writing, when a computer can write for you? This is because, like Professor Teichert hath said, old AI was a joke. So if you put something in, you put a prompt in that says something like, write about a fear, or write about a fear that I have, it would produce something like this. You ready? What I am afraid of is the wall of chicken, the wall of the tractor. It is hard to see under all that snow, and the man on the tractor could not see me, so I am on this tractor. I could not even write it if I wanted to. Stupid, right? Didn't make any sense. Old AI was a joke. New AI, especially through ChatGPT, you put in the same prompt, describe two fears that I have about chickens and tractors, and it comes up with this. I have a fear of chickens and tractors because they both make me feel extremely uncomfortable. Chickens, with their rapid movements and unpredictability, can startle me easily. Tractors, on the other hand, are large and noisy machines that I find intimidating. These fears stem from past experiences and have a significant impact on my daily life. And I don't know how many people are actually afraid of chickens, maybe tractors. But again, this is a perfectly grammatically well-constructed sentence, or sentences, paragraph, that were developed by a computer, by this coding program that it produced. And this is just a silly example. The things you can do on ChatGPT are quite sophisticated. And so, of course, you can see the potential problems here. So, like sex ed, I guess, we're a little bit worried about teaching you about ChatGPT because you might actually go out and do it. And we're not sure we want you to do that. And because all it takes is a really short prompt, and then you can get essentially what many English teachers require you to do. So, for instance, if you put in, write a 5-paragraph essay explaining post-colonialism in Shakespeare's The Tempest, it will do it. And it will probably be accurate. Or write a paper explaining how electrons, neutrons, and protons interact, and it will do it. And it'll be accurate. Also, the prompt doesn't even have to be long. You can just say, write an essay about electrons. Again, it will produce it. You can also say, write a sacrament meeting talk about faith, use scriptural references, and it'll do it. It'll be just as boring as every other sacrament meeting talk you've ever been to, but it will do it, and it will provide scriptural references. Now, of course, you can see the value in this, saving a lot of time. It makes writing a lot easier, and now you'll have several hours free where you can go play Minecraft and do other important things. So that's obviously the benefit. Again, it can save you time. But here's the cost. Instead of seeing ourselves as writers, we may start to see ourselves as prompt engineers. Rather than writing to take command of an idea, we write to a computer. We write a command to a computer. So don't get me wrong, there's value in prompt engineering. It's sort of a kind of coding in a way to know what to say so you can get the right results from the computer. And it's a skill that many career fields may be asking for in the near future, and you may even see classes here in the next 10 years called Prompt Engineering 1010 or whatever. But my job as an English teacher is not to teach you how to be a prompt engineer. My job is to teach you how to express yourself and your ideas using your voice, your authentic voice, not the voice of a computer. And that's the major cost about AI that I want to warn you about. When you use it as a tool, that's fine. There are many things you can do to use it as a tool. But if you use it as a substitute, instead of just as a tool, you are surrendering your own voice, your authentic human voice. You're surrendering to a computer. Sort of like Ursula, the sea witch in Little Mermaid, who tells Ariel, it won't cost you much, just your voice. It's the same sort of thing here too. The potential cost is your authentic voice. Here at Snow College, at least right now, as we talked about ChatGPT and other AI, we consider using AI to write your papers for you as plagiarism. Sure, it's not another person, it's an entity writing your paper for you, but it's still not you. It's not your ideas, it's not your analyses, it's not your voice. And as somebody who says this, who says, I'm just going to let ChatGPT write my essays for me, what you're essentially saying when you do that is that you don't value your education. All you care about is that piece of paper at the end, and you'll let everything else go. You'll surrender your agency to the Borg, to the hive mind. You're willing to do that. Now, there are some cases when using AI honestly can be good. I've mentioned this. So I'm on the faculty senate. There's a group of senators from all the faculty, and I take the notes. I'm the note taker. And so I'm just typing really fast all the time during our meetings. And then what I do is I run those notes through ChatGPT and have it produce a more coherent narrative. And it does really well. Suddenly, they're complete sentences, and it's not just my notes. The one thing that it cannot do is be accurate about the meeting. Sometimes it makes up false things. In fact, I've had it do research on sort of special areas of knowledge, and it will produce fake information just to answer the prompt. So accuracy is another thing to think about, too. You always need to go back and double-check whenever you use ChatGPT to make sure it's accurate. Many of you use Grammarly, which is a kind of AI, and it helps you fix errors on your paper, punctuation, and so forth. It can help with translation, but even in translation, don't in your Spanish class use ChatGPT to do the translation for you. You're selling yourself short on your education. And Professor Teichert hath said, and Professor Dittli will soon say, the ways that ChatGPT and AI can be used in different disciplines, and it will vary from discipline to discipline. And so, if you have a question about the use of AI in class, just talk to your professor, and they can provide guidelines on what's appropriate and what's not. But never, ever use AI to do your thinking for you. Never surrender your human voice. Whenever I've caught a student plagiarizing, which doesn't happen very often, but when I have, I always tell them that anything written in your own voice is better than anything you could copy and paste from another person. And the principle applies here to AI. Anything generated by your own writing, by your own voice, is going to be better than anything AI can produce. I got 2 books for you to read. Number 1, Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. Second, I, Robot by Isaac Asimov. So the first one deals with the prevalence of technology in a society and how it overtakes their lives. The second one, I, Robot, talks about what it means to be a human and robots acting in human roles. So both of them might surprise you how accurate they are. It's almost like they're sort of prophecies written in the 20th century that apply to our day. But again, they'll both help you consider what it means to be human and help you consider the benefits and the costs of any technological advancement. So my last thing here in closing, I went ahead and I asked AI what it suggests you should know about appropriate AI use. And this is what it said Words of revelation from our God, even ChatGPT. Generative AI offers valuable advantages in college education, enhancing students' writing and learning experiences. It can assist in content generation, translation, and creative brainstorming. However, it's essential to acknowledge its costs and challenges. The risk of reduced authenticity, plagiarism, and over-reliance on AI must be addressed. To harness its benefits while mitigating these drawbacks, students should use generative AI as a supportive tool, not a substitute for their writing skills. That's what AI says. I was like, that was really boring. That's like something a boomer would read and write. So I said, ChatGPT, turn this into Gen Z language. And it came up with this. Generative AI is like having a lit writing buddy in college. It can help you flex those essay writing muscles, translate stuff, and even spark some creative vibes. But here's the T, it's not all Gucci. Sometimes it might mess with your originality, trigger that plagiarism alarm, or make you low-key lazy. So you gotta use it as your sidekick, not the main boss of your writing game. It's all about that balance, fam, keeping it cool and playing it smart with generative AI in college. Thus spake Zarathustra. I say these things in the name of Ray Bradbury and Isaac Asimov. Amen.
Chemistry lab class, we did a lab where we extract caffeine from black tea leaves. And as part of that assignment, as part of training my students how to write a research report, the research report component that they focus on in this lab is the introduction. This is the part where the scientists, the authors of the research, say, why is this research valuable? Why does it matter? What are we studying? What's already known about it? What's already been done? So I've given my students in past years this assignment to go research xanthines, which are the class of compounds that caffeine belongs to. It's also the class of compounds that theobromine, a close relative of caffeine that you may have heard of in chocolate, and write some paragraphs for the introduction section, and then have to provide me with some chemical structures and some resources. And so this year I changed this assignment to say, okay, now I want you to use the assignment content, have ChatGPT write this for you. Then you need to double check it, because as Professor Thomas said, ChatGPT is known for making things up. So double check its sources, and if it gives you some bogus sources, find you some real ones. And then you need to take their first draft, and again, one of the risks of using AI is that you lose your own voice. So then you need to rewrite it in your own voice and tell me about it. And then I gave them as an example. So this document that I've got linked here, which I can't actually click on because this is just a screenshot of my assignment on Canvas, was published in the American Chemical Society Journal about energy usage, but it's become widely cited because it gives us, because here we go, machines are about to change scientific publishing forever. This is a very interesting read, and this is an open access article, so if you go into Google Scholar and input machines are about to change scientific publishing forever, you should be able to find this and read this. And so this article discusses a lot of the questions that both Professor Thomas and Professor Teichert have talked about related to the opportunities and the risks of using AI. And one of the fascinating things about this is that it includes as supporting information as an appendix the documentation shows what questions did the researchers use to generate each section of the paper, and then how did they modify the text that ChatGPT gave to them. So we have now this ability to have AI write stuff for us. And so this is a concern not just in academia, this is a concern in everywhere that writing and publishing is done. And so here, the Journal of the American Chemical Society recently updated their criteria for authorship to address this question. And I think this statement here from the ACS is a pretty good statement for AI for any class where you have to do writing on this campus. AI tools do not qualify for authorship, and that you should disclose them with a description of where and how you use them. And a lot of, I would expect to see, just like I just did with my assignment, you might see assignments in your classes kind of transforming to this model. Okay, it's out there. Let's be the masters of it, rather than letting it be the masters of us. Also, in the discussion of GPT, not just within the cloistered world of the university, but within publishing in general, and especially research publishing in general, is the idea that AI can now become a component of the peer review cycle. So, cycle for publishing, you do some research, you write a manuscript, you send it to journals, you hope one of them accepts it. Once the journal accepts it, they choose some peers in your field, so people who are doing respected research in the same general area that you're doing in your manuscript, your draft, which by the time you send it out as a manuscript to the journal is probably like the 25th or the 100th actual draft, gets sent out to your peers to be reviewed for ethical use of the scientific process, ethical use of methods, proper use of methods, etc., for inspection of your data analysis and conclusions. Have you made a claim that is appropriately supported by the evidence that you've provided, those kinds of things. And so the suggestion here is that AI could now become involved in this publishing end of the process, that AI could be used, for instance, to sort manuscripts. Where should, based on what this manuscript is about, who should it go to? Or based on the people who wrote this manuscript, do they need some help with translation into English? Or who would be an appropriate reviewer, an appropriate peer reviewer for this manuscript? And with apologies to Professor Thomas, who just said that we shouldn't cut and paste, here are opportunities and challenges of using AI for peer review. Cut and paste from this URL that I have here at the bottom of the slide. So here's my source. So, and these are kind of comparable to some of the opportunities and challenges that Professor Teichert mentioned. AI gives us opportunities for greater efficiency and for greater support for people who are new at trying to learn something and do something. But then we have ethical considerations. How do we use this appropriately? And how accurate is it? How reliable is it? So, a lot of overlap here. We can also, of course, talk about the uses of AI in chemistry education, and some of the ones that have been brought up within the chemistry education community and within education as a discipline. In general, is that when we want to create tests, sometimes educators are really bad at coming up with usable test questions, especially variations of usable test questions. And so this would be a thing where we could use AI as a tool to generate a database of questions, which would then have to be combed through by an actual human to check for things like accuracy. But because AI makes mistakes, something that's been suggested, at least in the chemistry education community, is that we can use AI to make wrong answers and then ask our students to say to analyze it, to move further up, higher and deeper into their educational learning, into their learning process, to find out, why is this answer erroneous? What's wrong with this answer, and fix it? And I think that's actually kind of what your teachers who might already have AI assignments are asking you to do when they might say, like I did in the assignment I just showed you, have ChatGPT write you a first draft, and then you make it better. Find what's wrong, make it better, put it in your voice. Then, with the conversational aspects of AIs, going back to Eliza, we could imagine using AIs to provide interactive and adaptive tutoring, where the AI now can help a student find answers and find resources some opportunities, but now I'd like to kind of explore what does AI mean for chemistry as a field, as a research discipline, in more ways than just this, because there are lots of things that AI can do for us. And I will note to you that the images on the rest of my slides, when I volunteered to participate in this convocation, I basically went back through my office and dug through my pile of chemical and engineering news. So this is a trade magazine published by the American Chemical Society that is published every week. And so I just went back through my pile of CNENs from about the past 5 years and just pulled out every issue that mentioned something about AI. And I got a stack of about 12 or 15. And then I looked through and said, okay, what ones were actually things that I wanted to use for this presentation? And so these images are like me with my cell phone camera taking pictures of the magazines. So you can't see the date here because it's probably too small. I didn't even realize it. So this is March of 2019, suggesting that AI can really be used to help open chemistry up as a field to chemists who have disabilities. So here, this young woman is blind. And chemistry is such a visual science that being blind makes it very difficult to do, but there are very successful blind chemists. And so part of this article discusses how artificial intelligence could be used to help chemists who are blind and to make chemistry a more accessible field for people who are blind. Elsewhere in the article, it talks about how automation, AI combined with automation, could help chemists with physical disabilities. Talks about a graduate student who suffered a serious injury, had to be on crutches, which limited his ability to use his hands in the lab, and that using automation enabled him to proceed forward with his research work and not be set back by the injury that he'd suffered. And so I think, this is another area where AI can provide us with some tremendous benefits by allowing chemistry and other disciplines to become more accessible. Another aspect of AI that chemists are pretty excited about is the use of AI to sift through mountains of data, and especially visual data. A lot of the talk about the benefits of AI in chemistry has to do with the ability of AI to produce data drudgery, to borrow the phrasing from one of the articles I read. That we can use chemists to develop a specialist AI that can scan literature, scan data, and do kind of that first step of the data analysis, which then a human would then have to look over and verify and validate. And as an example in the article here, so the next slide here is a snapshot from this particular article. NMR here stands for nuclear magnetic resonance. This is a technique where we use an enormous magnet and radio frequency waves to tell us about the structure of a molecule. And so this image here represents the kind of data, the kind of visual data that can be generated, and that we can take this information, and a human can spend months looking through this kind of information and then feed it into 2 or 3 series of computer analysis programs and get, this is a representation of the structure of a protein. And this is an example that's near and dear to my heart because this is what I did for my PhD thesis. So this is the protein that I worked on, or a representation, a very abstracted representation of the protein I worked on for my PhD thesis. And this is data, actual data from my PhD thesis. And I spent months working on this data analysis and working on the next steps to generate this image representing the structure of my protein. And with AI, this kind of data work could be significantly shortened, leaving the researcher, the student, the group, the research group, to be focused more on what does this tell us. So here in the blue, this represents a mutated, an altered version of the protein. And the structure here in the green that it's overlaid with represents the naturally occurring structure of this protein. So now, reducing that data processing could give the scientists then more time to think about, well, what do these differences mean? Why did the changes that I made to the sequence of the protein lead to these changes in the structure, and what do these changes mean for the functionality of the protein, for the things that are going to advance human knowledge, rather than the things that are just processed again, because my graduate field of expertise is protein structure, for about the past 30 years, chemists and biochemists have been really interested in this question of what is the relationship between the sequence of a protein, so the ordered string of these are the amino acids in the protein, and this is the order they're becoming, how does that translate into the three-dimensional shape of the functional protein? And what is the relationship between changes in the sequence, changes in the structure, and changes in the function? So there's been a huge amount of work, again, about the past 30 years, of trying to understand this relationship between structure and sequence of proteins. And then the way that we test our understanding, right? So scientists, we have questions, we make hypotheses, we collect some data, we come up with some conclusions. And so one of the ways that we test our conclusions that we've come to, this is the relationship between structure and sequence, is to try to design a sequence that will have a specific structure and will hopefully have a specific function. And so now AI can help us with that. AI has the possibility to do some of this for it and to allow us to explore these connections between what is the sequence and what is the structure with a lot more variation than human minds working by themselves or even in a team could do. Because now we're applying the power of computing even more than we were before. And this was already a very computer-intensive process. But once we get AI involved, now we can start to, as it says here, dream up new structures. And this example, and I didn't pull any snapshots from the article itself, gives us examples of where the AI has produced sequences that fold into structures that don't occur in nature. And so now we can think about, can I actually make this structure as a protein? Can I engineer a bacteriophage to put this DNA into a bacterium, get the bacterium to make this protein for me, and validate the structure, the AI-generated structure of the protein by having the bacterium actually successfully produce it, and then validate that that's the structure that the bacteria-produced protein actually had. This offers us some fascinating ways to explore this field in greater depth that we didn't have. And so maybe I should put this slide first in this discussion. So again, this is my protein that I studied for my graduate work. Here's the primary sequence of the protein, the amino acids that it's made from. And then here's, again, this abstract representation of the three-dimensional structure of the protein. What's that relationship? AI can help us explore that. I see that I have like 5 minutes left because we ended on 20. Yeah, so some other opportunities. There are so many molecules out there that we have discovered and so many molecules that we haven't discovered. And so AI can help us explore all those molecules, help us think of all the possible ways that we can combine pieces of molecules to make new molecules. And then AI can help us figure out how to make those molecules. So one of the huge questions in chemistry is, here's a beautiful complex molecule that was isolated from a marine organism, or a tree, or an animal. How do I make this molecule? One of the earliest Nobel Prizes in chemistry was awarded to Robert Woodward for his structure of strychnine, and I didn't put a slide in here about that, which is this incredibly complex molecule, and it took years of very careful chemistry work to figure out how to make it. And AI now, there was a huge amount of buzz in the chemistry community about 5 years ago when a neural network, so kind of one of the components of AI, was shown to be able to design chemical syntheses as well as humans would. To say, here's the molecule, this is how we take it apart into smaller pieces, this is how we put those smaller pieces back together. And so the ability of AI then to not only predict new molecular structures, but also to suggest to chemists, with the reactions that we know, how do we put it together is incredibly powerful. But some of the limitations, some of the debate involved, that the machine learning up to this point has only included successful reactions. It has only included things that worked. Because when people write papers, they write about the things that worked. And sometimes they touch briefly on, oh, we tried this and it didn't work. But they don't usually write about the stuff that didn't work. And so a lot of the debate about using AI for synthesis planning is that it's blinded somewhat by the fact that the training for the AI hasn't included what didn't work, what not to try. Don't do this, it's not going to work. diseases that we don't have molecular targets yet for, and use AI to help us examine the structures of the proteins involved and examine small molecule space and find this molecule will fit with that protein. Maybe AI can help us suggest those matches, and then we can test those matches without having to sort through and try lots of things that aren't going to work. And so AI is really huge is becoming increasingly huge in the pharmaceutical industry because of this ability it gives us to explore more broadly than human pace alone can do. But of course, this brings up ethical considerations. So this issue of chemical and engineering news came out just last week. So, 2 weeks ago. And both of these images here were generated by AI. So the cover image was generated by Mid-Journey, a collage illustration of scientists using artificial intelligence for chemistry equipment and computer code and chemical structures in a chemistry laboratory. The other image here, which is the front page, was also generated by AI using a summary prompt. And as part of the discussion in this article, I stand by Times, some of the components of the use of AI in chemistry research say, how is this different from Photoshop? 25 years ago, Photoshop was a bomb on image and image understanding and our understanding of, is this image real or is this image fake? And what can you ethically, legitimately do to manipulate your images? So again, this is data from my own PhD thesis. What can you ethically do with Photoshop to manipulate your images? So here I've added labels and what is not appropriate manipulation. And since we're almost about to end, I'd like to actually circle back to Professor Boudreau's somewhat humorous title, thinking about, is AI our salvation or our destruction, or is it potentially both? How many of you know who this is? I see crickets, so maybe this wasn't such a good example. Maybe this screenshot's a little better? I've seen one big hand over here. So this is what game? That's Horizon Zero Dawn. Yeah, this is Horizon Zero Dawn. And without spoiling the plot too much for you, this guy over here and this guy here are the main antagonists of the game, Hades. And the astonishing plot of this game is all about AI as destruction and as salvation, which could be outgrowths of a lot of these aspects of things that we talked about, that the three of us have presented to you today.
I'd like to thank Professors Dittli, Teichert, and Thomas for coming and spending time with us today. I know it's time for you guys to go. If any of you would like to stay and ask questions, please do so. Otherwise, we'll see you next week.